All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're digging into a really big shakeup in India's power sector. It's a change that could completely reshape how the country's biggest industries keep the lights on and their machines humming.
I mean, it's a great question, right? It seems kind of complicated, but for a lot of India's largest companies, it's been an absolute lifeline. Okay, let's get into this and find out exactly why.
So, to really get this, we first need to understand the fundamental problem that industries in India have been wrestling with for years.
You see, for any huge industrial operation, just relying on the public power grid can be a total minefield. You're dealing with crazy high electricity tariffs, a supply that can be, well, pretty unreliable. And then you get hit with a whole bunch of extra fees. Things like cross-subsidy surcharges, where you're basically paying more to help cover the cost of power for other people. It's expensive, it's unpredictable, and frankly, it's a massive headache if you're trying to run a competitive business.
So what do you do when you're facing all that? Well, industry got creative. They came up with a really clever workaround to take back control of their own power supply. And that's where this idea of captive power comes into play.
So what in the world is a captive power project? It's actually a pretty simple idea. A company, or even a group of companies, gets together and just builds its own power plant to meet its own electricity needs. This means they get cheaper, much more reliable power, and they get to sidestep all those extra charges from the grid.
Okay, so to get this special captive status and all its benefits, a project had to follow two key rules. Pretty straightforward.
Rule number one was all about ownership. The companies actually using the power had to collectively own at least 26% of that power plant. This was to make sure they had some real skin in the game.
And rule number two, that was about consumption. Those same owners had to use at least 51% of the electricity generated by that plant every single year. The goal was to make sure these were genuinely for self-use and not just sneaky commercial power plants trying to get a tax break.
So far, so good, right? Seems like a smart solution to a very real problem. But, and there's always a but, this is where this well-intentioned system started to go off the rails and create some huge problems.
And this quote really gets to the heart of the issue. The rules were enforced with just zero flexibility. Think about it. If a factory's production slows down for a week, or a small operational issue causes its power demand to dip just a little, it could have absolutely disastrous consequences.
And this just perfectly shows the crazy chain reaction. A small dip in demand means one company might not consume power in the exact proportion to its ownership stake. Suddenly, the whole project loses its captive status and boom, that business gets slapped with the very same massive grid surcharges it was trying to avoid in the first place.
The key takeaway here is that this constant risk just scared off investors. I mean, why would you build a multi-million-dollar power plant if a tiny, temporary dip in your business could trigger these crippling penalties? It just created a ton of uncertainty, led to endless legal fights, and really held back the very system it was supposed to support.
Okay, so the government saw this wasn't working. Now, India's Ministry of Power has proposed a major overhaul, set for 2026, and it's all designed to inject some much-needed common sense and flexibility back into the system.
The first big fix is all about ownership. The old rules looked at every single company individually. The new rules, they recognize that modern businesses are, well, they're complicated. Now, an entire corporate group, the holding company and all its subsidiaries, can be treated as a single user. This just makes so much more sense.
And this is the real game changer on the consumption side. Forget about that rigid individual proportionality rule. Under the new proposal, as long as all the owners as a group consume at least 51% of the power, they're good to go. This is a huge deal. It gives them massive operational flexibility.
And that's not all. The draft rules also add a bunch of other smart fixes. For instance, they give a break to anchor investors, the ones who own a big chunk of the project. And they introduce more flexibility in how compliance is even measured. Basically, it's all about reducing the friction and giving businesses the certainty they need.
Okay, so we've been pretty deep in the regulatory weeds here. But why should any of us care about this stuff? Let's zoom out for a second and look at the real, big picture impact.
This table does a fantastic job of connecting these seemingly small rule changes to massive national goals. When you reduce the risk, you encourage investment. That's a no-brainer. When you give industries cheaper, more reliable power, you make them more competitive on the world stage. And hey, when you encourage power to be generated closer to where it's used, you make the entire national grid more stable and efficient. It's a win-win-win.
And here's maybe the most crucial point of this whole story. These changes aren't just about traditional power. This is a massive catalyst for India's clean energy transition. By making it easier and safer to invest in these group captive projects, the new rules could unlock a huge wave of private investment in new solar and wind farms all across the country.
So we're left with this big question. By providing clarity, cutting the risk, and just making the rules match how businesses actually work, could this overhaul be the key that helps power the next phase of India's growth, both economically and environmentally? Well, only time will tell, but the stage is definitely set. Thanks for tuning in.